Okay, now you guys are dangerous. Variable costs, fixed costs. So let me introduce one more item. Referring to this particular slide, there is the potential that an account within your purview has elements of both fixed cost and variable cost in it. This is then referred to as a mixed cost. I've never actually referred to it ever as a semi-variable cost. My personal experience is we just call it a mixed cost. And what that means is some component of the cost is fixed and some component of the cost is variable, as illustrated by this slide. So for example, if you have an electricity bill and you have them at your home, the mere fact that PG&E is hooked up to your house and you pay a basic rate, that basic rate per month is illustrated by the fixed cost line. But depending upon how much power you use, whether or not you have that big HD 80-inch TV on a lot, or whether or not you've got your lights in front of the house on, or it's Christmas time and you've got every light in the neighborhood, kind of like Christmas Vacation, if you remember that movie, that cost is going to go up or down depending upon your usage. The question is, which accounts have a mixed cost element in them? How do you determine that? Well, it's conceivable that a firm might take and do an engineering analysis of every account and determine whether or not it's a fixed cost account or a variable cost account, and also determine whether or not it might have a mixed cost component. And actually, we did do this in my career. My background was always been in operations in Silicon Valley. And we would look at our accounts and determine whether or not they were a variable account or a fixed account, because we needed to do that for planning and decision making. And if we spotted one that kind of had both, in theory, and what your books defined, is methodologies with which to determine how much of that account's cost is variable and fixed. Now, I don't want to downplay the importance of perhaps doing this activity of understanding how much of it is fixed and how much of it's variable, but I'll tell you how we used to do it. One way, and I'm going to be a bit comical about it, but it's not too far from the truth. Kind of wet my finger, I'd stick it out the window, and if the wind was blowing in this direction, we'd call the account fixed. If it was blowing in this direction, we'd call it variable. Now, obviously, I didn't do that. But what we did do is we would kind of sit back and say, we think the majority of this cost is variable, or the majority of this cost is fixed. And yes, some component of it, 20%, 30% might be fixed, and some of it, 20 or 30% might be variable. Well, if it was not that material to our decision making, or that material to our planning, we ignored trying to separate it. We simply said, we're going to consider it variable, or we're going to consider it fixed. We just felt that the level of activity and the level of analysis that was necessary to forge out those two components was, the law of diminishing returns. It was likely not going to change our decision making and our planning. So I recommend that you strongly consider that before embarking on some of the methods that are defined in the text, although they're very, very fine methods. So as a preamble to getting into a couple of these, I want to just emphasize the fact that apply management judgment always before embarking on analysis paralysis and getting to the point where you're quibbling over a dollar when you're dealing with millions.